The dining room was too bright for the words he chose. Light from the chandelier hit the glass bowls, scattering sharp reflections across the table. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "You're selfish. Your sister is better than you." Dad's voice cracked like it had been waiting years to split me open. "I'm Leah, 27, and in that moment I remembered every bill I had quietly covered. Every transfer, every month's rent slipped under her door so she wouldn't fall behind. And here was my father, comparing me, dismissing me, as if my worth could be weighed against hers in front of cold mashed potatoes and untouched bread rolls. I didn't raise my voice. I let silence collect like dust, then set my fork down. I smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just a thin, careful curve. "Good," I said softly. "Then I'm done paying her rent." The room seemed to exhale. My sister's eyes darted to the key I had placed beside my plate earlier, a habit, I guess, from always driving straight from work to dinner. That key caught the light, silver and small, but suddenly it felt heavier than the entire table. For the first time, Dad didn't look at me like I was his daughter. He looked at me like he had missed something, like the ground beneath him wasn't as steady as he believed. The laughter from the cousins at the far end stopped. Even the wall clock ticked louder, mocking the silence. I wanted to shake. I wanted to scream that I wasn't selfish, that I had carried more than they ever noticed. But instead, I folded my napkin neatly and pressed it against my lap. Quiet was sharper than rage. My sister reached for her glass, hand trembling. She whispered, almost too low to catch, "Leah, you don't mean that." But I did. I meant every syllable. And in that moment, the meaning shifted. I wasn't just talking about rent. I was talking about years, about the invisible weight I'd hauled while being told I was less. Have you ever had family cross your boundaries so cleanly, so boldly, that almost felt rehearsed? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes silence says more than defense ever could. I looked at the plates, at the food no one was eating, at the family portrait on the wall with its crooked frame. My chest rose, steady, and my smile lingered just a second too long. That was the night I realized comparison was their weapon. But silence could be mine. The silence didn't last. Dad's chair scraped against the tiled floor, a harsh sound that felt like it cut through my skin. His face reddened, veins at his temples sharp as wires. "You think you can just walk away from responsibility?" His words weren't a question. They were an accusation, a judgment, a sentence. I didn't answer. I traced the edge of the silver key, resting near my plate. It was smooth, cool. A reminder that the locks didn't belong to my sister or to him. They belonged to me. My mother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Leah, don't be dramatic. You know your sister needs you. You've always been the strong one." Her voice was calm, like she was smoothing a wrinkle on the tablecloth. But beneath it was expectation, the kind that had held me down since childhood. My sister stared at her lap, cheeks blotched with pink. "I didn't ask her to pay," she mumbled, as if that excused the comfort she had swallowed for years. I looked at her, really looked. The way her hair was styled, the way her nails were polished, small luxuries that rent money had allowed her to keep. And for a flicker of a second, I wondered if she even realized how much had been mine, disguised as hers. I kept my voice steady. Needing and deserving aren't the same thing. The chandelier buzzed faintly above us, one bulb flickering as if the room itself agreed. My father slammed his palm against the table, rattling the silverware. "You ungrateful child. We raised you better than this." Ungrateful. The word coiled around me. My breath caught, but I didn't flinch. I had been their safety net, their quiet solution, their background provider. And still I was the selfish one. I folded my arms, leaning back. Better or quieter? For a second, no one breathed. The question hung there, thick as smoke. My cousin cleared his throat nervously, shifting in his seat. Someone's spoon clinked against china by mistake, a sound too loud in the pause. Dad's lips curled into a smirk that wasn't humor at all. You'll regret this, Leah. Family is all you'll ever have. Don't forget who gave you everything. Everything. Another word heavy with irony. The cracked plates, the debt I had helped cover, the endless reminders of who was better. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I reached for my water, sipped, and placed the glass back down gently. Calm. Controlled. Each move a refusal to play his game. The key on the table caught the light again, a reminder I wasn't bound here. And as I exhaled, steady and slow, a thought formed sharp in my chest. Maybe walking away wasn't losing family. Maybe it was finding myself. I pushed my chair back slowly, the wooden legs groaning against the floor. That sound alone seemed to echo louder than my father's anger. Where are you going? Mom's voice was sharp now, stripped of its earlier softness. I kept my hand on the key, sliding it into my palm. Home, I said simply. The word landed heavy. My sister looked up, her eyes wide. Leah, please, she began, but stopped when she saw the way I held the key, as if I was reclaiming more than a metal object. Dad sneered. You walk out that door, you'll regret it. You'll come crawling back, begging for us to forgive you. That's how this ends. His certainty was the same weapon he had always used. He believed control lived in his voice. But I had learned something else. Control could live in silence, too. I stood, sliding my napkin onto the table, neat and deliberate. The clink of my chair falling back into place sounded final, like a door closing. You still wear that perfume? Mom suddenly asked, her first decoy, as if small talk could reel me back. The randomness of it struck me, but I realized what she was doing. Distracting, minimizing, softening the edges of what had just happened. Yes, I replied steady, and I bought it myself. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The dining room felt smaller with each passing second, the air thick with unsaid words. The photo on the wall, our family portrait, tilted slightly to the left, stared back at me like a mockery. Everyone smiling, everyone perfect, no one seeing the cracks beneath. My sister's voice wavered. Leah, don't leave like this. We can talk later. I turned to her, meeting her eyes. Later is always too late. For the first time, she didn't look like my sister. She looked like a stranger, someone who had taken, who had smiled through the taking, and who never once asked what it cost me. The front door was just down the hall. The faint draft of cool air whispered against my skin, calling. The chandelier flickered again, and I thought about how often things in this house broke but were never fixed, just patched, just ignored. As I stepped away from the table, Dad's voice thundered one last time. You're nothing without us, Leah. I paused in the doorway, the key pressed tight in my palm, edges digging into my skin. I didn't look back, because for the first time I realized maybe they needed me more than I ever needed them. And that realization felt like freedom. The night air wrapped around me the moment I stepped outside, cool and unapologetic. It carried the faint scent of damp earth after a week drizzle, sharp and clean compared to the heaviness I'd just left behind. I held the key in my palm, its edges cutting lightly into my skin. Under the porch light, it glimmered as if it knew. It had always been more than rent, more than duty. It had been a leash. Tonight it felt like a blade. Behind me, the muffled echoes of raised voices leaked through the walls. My father's tone, thick with authority. My mother's hushes, always meant to keep appearances tidy. My sister's silence, as predictable as it was deafening. I took a deep breath, walking toward my car parked by the curb. Each step across the gravel sounded like punctuation. Unlocking the door, I caught my reflection in the car's side mirror. My face looked the same, but my eyes didn't. There was no shrinking in them anymore. For the first time, they looked mine. As I sat inside, I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I let the stillness soak into me. Across the street, A neighbor's porch light blinked on. A dog barked twice, then fell quiet. Ordinary life went on, detached from the storm I had just left behind. My phone buzzed. A message. From my sister. Please don't do this. I can't afford it without you. The words stung, not because they carried guilt, but because they carried no recognition. No thank you for the years. No apology. Just need. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat. The screen dimmed, swallowing her words into black. I thought of the rent receipts in my drawer at home, stacked like unspoken confessions. Every slip of paper proof that I had carried her, month after month. And suddenly, those receipts weren't memories of generosity. They were evidence. I turned the key in the ignition, the car humming to life. But before I shifted into gear, I let the house fill the frame of my windshield one last time. The tilted family portrait flashed in my mind again. That smile I'd been forced to hold for decades. I whispered to myself, steady and sure, no more. And as the tires rolled against the asphalt, the key in my pocket pressed against my thigh, no longer heavy. It felt lighter now, not as a burden, but as a reminder that locks only matter if you stay inside them. My apartment greeted me with silence, not the sharp, suffocating kind from dinner, but the soft, unbothered quiet of a space that belonged entirely to me. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. These were my sounds, not theirs. I slipped off my shoes, letting them fall where they landed. My bag hit the couch with a dull thud, and then I pulled the key from my pocket, laying it on the coffee table. Under my lamp's warm glow, it looked different now. Less like an obligation, more like an artifact. I opened the drawer in my desk, the one I usually avoided. Inside, the receipts lay stacked in neat rows, each paper marked with a date, an amount, her name. Proof of every month I had shouldered quietly. Proof that being selfish had never been an option for me. I ran my finger across the top one. January. Coldest month of the year, the one where I skipped buying a winter coat, so she wouldn't miss a payment. I remembered standing in the store, staring at the tag, then walking away. The coat stayed, the rent went. One by one, I spread the receipts across the table. The papers covered the surface like puzzle pieces of a truth no one wanted to admit. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Dad, you've made your point. Now fix this before your sister ends up on the street. I laughed, a small, bitter sound. Fix. As if my role had always been handyman of their failures. Another buzz. Mom, Leah, don't be cruel. Family comes first. Cruel. That word cut deeper than selfish, because it meant they had never seen my help as kindness, only as obligation. I picked up one receipt, held it to the light. The ink had begun to fade, but the numbers were still there, still clear, still mine. And as I stared at it, the thought came uninvited but unshakable. This wasn't cruelty. This was clarity. I gathered the stack again, bound them with a paperclip, and slid them back into the drawer. Not hidden this time. Waiting. Evidence. The key still glimmered on the table. Its edges no longer cut when I picked it up. Instead, it pressed solid and sure against my skin. It was no longer just a key to her place. It was a key to the truth, to what I had given and what I had finally taken back. I leaned back on the couch, letting the quiet fill the room. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, not because I had left them behind, but because I had finally chosen me. Morning light filtered through my blinds, streaking across the stack of receipts, still sitting on my desk. I hadn't tucked them away again. I wanted to see them, wanted to remember that the weight I carried had always been real. The key lay on top of the stack now, as if it belonged there. A symbol, yes, but also a decision waiting to be made. I brewed coffee, letting the rich smell settle into the air, and stared at my phone. More messages had come overnight. Mom, you embarrassed us last night. Do you realize what people will say? Dad, you'll apologize at dinner tomorrow. Be ready. My sister, Nothing. Just silence. Their patterns were so predictable, it almost made me laugh. They weren't worried about me. They weren't even worried about her. They were worried about perception, about image, about keeping the family portrait from slipping further off its nail. I sipped my coffee, then pulled out an envelope. One by one, I slipped the receipts inside. Each paper slid, smoothly, no hesitation. January through December. Year after year. It wasn't revenge I was preparing. It was truth. By noon, I found myself back on their porch. The key in my pocket, the envelope clutched in my hand. My heart beat steady, not frantic. Calm, like I had rehearsed this moment my whole life. When Mom opened the door, her face flickered between relief and irritation. "Leah," she breathed, pulling me inside before the neighbors could see. "Finally, let's talk like adults." Dad was in the living room, his posture rigid, arms crossed. "You came to your senses," he said as if that were fact. I set the envelope down on the coffee table, beside the same crooked family portrait I'd stared at the night before. The chandelier hummed above, another bulb flickering. "No," I said quietly. "I came to return what doesn't belong to me." Dad's brow furrowed, but before he could speak, I slid the envelope across the table. The paper inside shifted with a faint rustle, a sound sharp enough to draw their eyes. "What is this?" Mom asked, suspicion clouding her voice. "Receipts," I said. "Every month I paid her rent. Every sacrifice you called duty. Every silence you mistook for weakness." Dad opened the envelope, his face tightening as the papers spilled out. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. My sister, who had been standing in the doorway, paled. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver key, placing it on top of the papers. "This is yours now. I don't carry it anymore." The room froze. For the first time, none of them had a script ready. The silence in the room was louder than any of Dad's shouting. He flipped through the receipts, his hands shaking more than he wanted to admit. The numbers didn't lie. They stacked higher than his pride, higher than all the years of accusations he had hurled at me. Mom's voice cracked first. "Leah, why would you keep these?" I tilted my head. "Why wouldn't I? You forget words, but paper doesn't." Dad slammed the stack back onto the table, receipts scattering like feathers. "So you've been keeping score? That's what this is about." His tone dripped with anger, but I could hear it, that thin thread of fear beneath. I didn't flinch. No, I was keeping proof. Proof that I'm not the selfish one you painted me to be. My sister finally moved, stepping forward, her voice trembling. I never asked you to do it all. You chose." "Chose?" My laugh was sharp, cutting. "You think I chose to skip vacations, to walk home in the snow without a proper coat, to silence my own dreams so you could stay comfortable? That wasn't a choice. That was survival for you. Paid for by me." Her eyes watered, but the tears felt too late. Mom tried again, softer this time. "We're family. Family helps each other. You've always been the strong one, Leah. Don't punish us for that." There it was again. Not gratitude, not acknowledgement. Just expectation dressed in softer words. I shook my head. Help only counts when it's recognized. Otherwise, it's servitude. Dad leaned forward, his smirk returning, though weaker now. "You'll come back. You'll regret this little performance. Life is hard alone." I leaned back, calm, almost amused. "Then let me learn the hard way. Because life with you has been harder." The key glinted on the table, resting on top of the receipts. For years, it had unlocked my sister's survival. Tonight, it locked in their accountability. I stood, smoothing my jacket. "This isn't revenge," I said, voice steady. "It's a mirror. Look at it as long as you want, but don't expect me to keep holding it up." As I reached the doorway, my sister whispered, "Leah, please don't leave us like this." I paused, hand on the frame. "I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving the version of me you all depended on. That Leah is gone." Their silence followed me out, heavier than their words ever were. But the moment the door shut behind me, the weight slid off my shoulders like a coat I never needed to wear again. The night air met me again as I stepped outside. Only this time it didn't sting. It felt open, crisp, like the beginning of something rather than the end. I slid into my car and placed the silver key on the passenger seat. For years, it had dug into my palm like a reminder of duty. Tonight, it was nothing more than an object. Cold metal. No power left. Back at my apartment, I didn't shove the receipts into a drawer this time. I placed them in a folder, sealed it, and wrote one word on the tab: boundaries. They weren't debts anymore. They weren't sacrifices. They were lessons. I brewed tea, sat by my window, and watched the city lights flicker awake. Somewhere in that silence, my phone buzzed again. A message from Mom. We need to talk. We can work this out. Just come by tomorrow. I stared at the words for a long time. They weren't apologies. They weren't acknowledgments. Just another pull. Another thread tugging at the leash they had always held. For the first time, I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up a pen and opened my journal. I hadn't written in months, too tired, too drained, too busy carrying weight that wasn't mine. The page welcomed me with its blankness. I wrote slowly, deliberately. I am not selfish. I am free. The words looked back at me, steady, unshaken. Days passed, then a week. Their calls slowed, the messages became fewer. I saw my sister's social media posts, new apartment, new struggles. She didn't tag me. She didn't need me anymore, not because she had grown, but because I had let go. And strangely, that was enough. One evening, a letter arrived in my mailbox. My father's handwriting, sharp and unsteady. Inside, Leah, you've made your point. We were wrong. Come back for dinner. The table feels empty without you. For years, I had chased that sentence, waited for it, needed it. But holding it in my hand now, I realized something. It wasn't validation I wanted. It was peace. And peace didn't live at their table. I folded the letter neatly, slid it into the same folder with the receipts, and closed the drawer. The key, though, I didn't keep it. I walked to the edge of the river that night, the moonlight silvering the surface, and let it fall. The splash was small, but it echoed in me like a bell. A door closed, a lock undone. For once, I wasn't bound to silence. I was choosing it.